cannot serve both God and mammon. Can't do it. It's impossible. Jesus said so. Because serving God and serving mammon are two entirely different things. God, the creator of the world, Father of all, first person of the Blessed Trinity. Mammon. In English, we think of money when we think of the word mammon. The Greek is mammonas, and it's a much bigger concept than that. It's not simply money. It also has to do with stuff. It has to do with things. It has to do with people that get in our way of doing what we're supposed to do. Mammonas. We ran into a similar word when we heard the gospel about the temptation of Jesus in the desert. Jesus had been baptized by John, and he is driven into the desert by the Holy Spirit. And there he meets a temptation. Satana. Satana. Satana is another Greek word that means something or somebody in the way of doing what you're supposed to do. Satana. So mammonas and Satana are very similar realities. With both of them, if we capitalize them, we can make them into sort of mythic figures. Satanas and mammonas. Things that get in our way or people. Because we are called by the Lord to serve Him and to follow the gospel. But we can't serve the world and serve God at the same time. Mammonas. The world can focus in on things of this life and forget about God. In the gospel, Jesus gives us this parable about the steward. He's totally lost his way. He was entrusted with his master's possessions and with the servants, and he messed up. He stole, he wasted. And so the master fires him. So before he leaves, though, he said, well, I need to do something. Since I'm not faithful to my master and I'm losing my job, I'm going to go out and get the people to care about me because I'm going to help them. Not that I really care about them, but I want to get myself ready for unemployment. So as we heard in the gospel, he calls all these debtors in, people that owe his master money or things. He says, how much do you owe my master? And they say, well, a whole bunch of olive oil or wheat. So he says, sit down and write a note for less than that. And what he's thinking of is that if I do this, it's really stealing from my master again, so I'm doing the very thing I'm being fired about. But when I'm unemployed, those people are going to owe me. And so one day they're going to open their door, and I'm going to be standing there. They owe me. They got to take care of me. So Jesus says, you know, you have to admire that cleverness of that dishonest steward. We don't, of course, approve of his dishonesty, but he's clever. He's clever in how he is playing that out. It says the children of light could learn to be clever as well, not in dishonest work, but in doing the work of God. You need to be creative, think outside the box. But we need to also make choices as we live out our lives. Mammonas is what gets in our way. What's in our way of doing God's work? We can see people in the culture who are doing things they shouldn't do. They're allowing themselves to follow an idea or a teaching or a belief that's contrary to God's teaching. And we know that because they are going after the very people Jesus loved in a special way. The poor. The poor. We see people attacking the poor. We see people abusing them, kicking them around, exploiting them, lying to them, taking advantage of them. We're called to don't admire that. We are not to admire people who do bad things. There are people who will take advantage of poor people, and poor is just not economic. You can have a lot of money and be emotionally poor or psychologically poor or even spiritually poor. So it's important that we not agree with people who hurt them when they're vulnerable, hurt them when they really need support. Because we're all in this together. We're community. Somewhere in our culture, and I don't know when it happened, we got this idea that it's just me. It's all about me. Me, not you, me. It's my life, it's my goals, it's my money, it's my goal, it's my spirituality, it's my soul. Nothing to do with you. It's all about me and God. Me and God are into this. That's totally contrary to the church's teaching in the gospel. That's not how Jesus set this up. The Holy Spirit didn't come on into an individual. The Holy Spirit came in to the early church, descended upon the disciples, and it became the living church, the presence of Jesus in the world. But this is a community. That's how people think. They thought at that time and have thought for thousands of years. Think about the community. The community is well, I'm well. The community is failing, I'm failing. This idea that we have today of being an individual, that I can do great and the rest of you can sink, is totally contrary to the teachings of Jesus. And so we're called, when we're thinking of people that we admire, are we admiring and supporting people who help the community, who reach out for everybody, to help all people, not just the select few, not just their little group, but who are reaching out to everyone? That's who we need to look to. Who's doing the work of Jesus in the world? You don't need to be Christian. They can be an unbeliever and live out the gospel. And so it's important that during this season, that when we look to people, who are we supporting? Who are we liking? Who do we want to be like? Not these people, not the people exploiting the poor, taking advantage of the people who are suffering, but really the people who are trying to support them. Amos, in the first reading, talks about this. He begins, "Hear this, you trample upon the needy and destroy the poor of the land." Destroy the poor of the land. Not only that, these people that he's talking about is so obnoxious that all they're doing is waiting for the Sabbath to be done, or waiting for the sacred holiday to be done, so they can go out and kick these people around some more. We can't wait. Can't wait for the Sabbath to be done. Can't wait till we're past this celebration. And now we can go out and fix the scales and cheat the people. We can go out and traffic in people, sell them. The poor are worth sandals. Go out and hurt people. Go out and take advantage of them and undercut them. Amos is very clear about that, of what to be careful of. Be careful if we support people who do this. Go out and go after the poor and hurt them and take advantage and try to get power and prestige from stomping on the poor and the vulnerable. Because God remembers. God remembers. Amos reminds us of that at the end of the reading. The Lord has sworn by the pride of Jacob. Jacob, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they're the founders of the three major religions in the world. The Lord has sworn by the pride of Jacob, never, never will I forget the thing they have done. We kick around the poor at great risk because Jesus is in the poor. Pharisees were very frustrated with Jesus during his public ministry. They want him to hang out with the powerful. If you wanted to find Jesus, don't go to a big house. Go down the block to the other side of town, because he's hanging out with the poor people down there, the sick and the sinners. That's where Jesus is. Jesus is in those suffering people. Again, not financially. It's the poor in many, many ways. Jesus is there with them. They're not there to be exploited or to be taken advantage of. Jesus says that when you give a cup of water to this little child, you can't get more vulnerable or poor than a little child. He says when you give that cup of water to that little child, you give it to me. The implication is that if you don't give that little child a cup of water, you're not giving it to me. You're not giving it to Jesus. We're buying into mammon, serving the world, letting all that get in the way of serving God. We're called to be faithful because we know that, as Amos reminds us, God doesn't forget the evil people do. Oh, God forgives. We approach God in contrition, sorry we did that, resolve not to do it again, try to make up for it. But even when God forgives us, God never forgets. No, God never forgets the bad things people have done. And so when we look to see who do we admire in the community, who do we support, who do we side with, find the people doing the work of Jesus in this world. Even if they're unchurched, even if they're atheists, doesn't matter. If they're living out the gospel, those are the people doing the work of God. And that we ought not to support the people who are harming the poor, because God will not forget that, and neither should we.